Hi, welcome to our talk on how to make a business case for your internal developer platform. I'm Andrew Gunch. I've spent the last 4 years as the Director of Engineering at AdHoc. I oversee platform engineering teams here at various government agencies, including having started and led the va.gov web platform. Before AdHoc, I worked at Google for a number of years, leading technical projects across a variety of platforms, including streaming media platforms, cloud UI platforms, and API platforms.
And I'm Kendra Skeen. I'm the Director of Product for AdHoc's Federal Civilian Business Unit. Previously, I was the product lead for the state of Georgia's enterprise web platform, and then I spent 3 years supporting the VA's Lighthouse API platform. I'm now supporting product teams across our federal civilian programs in areas such as GSA's Search.gov and the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. This gives me a good view into a variety of customer environments and challenges that teams face. So a little bit about AdHoc. We're a modern U.S. government contractor whose mission is to empower customers to deliver digital services that promote the general welfare. We see digital services as technology that enables effective interactions between organizations and the people they serve. You're here today because you already love platforms. You know what a platform is and the value an internal developer platform brings to your organization. You're already thinking in terms of scaling impact, solving problems once, and managing reuse. But sometimes it can be difficult to justify platforms to management, especially if they only see it as extra overhead that's not directly building your business's applications. So, how do you justify and explain the value of investing in an internal platform? We'll use this time today to talk through a range of justifications and arguments for platforms that we've seen resonate with senior management, such as CIOs and other leadership, across our experience with public and private sector organizations. The justifications we'll dive into today are around scale, cost, risk, and governance. But when thinking about which ones to pitch to your leadership, this is where knowing your audience will be critical. What's important to your leadership, and how do you speak to that? For example, in AdHoc's work with government agencies, we've often found that risk, compliance, and control are more important to stakeholders than cost savings. But in your private sector business, it might be that velocity of shipping features and cost of implementation are most important. So you're going to want to mix and match and use the justifications that are most helpful to your case.
When we look at Puppet's recent State of Platform Engineering report, we find a few nuggets that we can lean on to understand what motivates most organizations to platformize their technical stack. In particular, when we're thinking about how you frame a business case for your platform strategy, we can use the findings from this report that about 60% of the reasons for creating a platform speak to some level of speed of delivery and scale as top priorities. So let's talk about how you can pitch scale as a differentiator. We already know that scale is a core function of platforms, that platforms are about solving problems once and having teams build on that common infrastructure. Even though this is a core concept of platforms, there's a few slight variations on how you can pitch that to management. First, you might talk about how a platform can increase the velocity and effectiveness of individual application teams. Because your users aren't starting from scratch, they get to use common infrastructure. And that means they're already further along when they get started. Because of this, you can scale the number of teams moving things forward more quickly. Next, you could talk about it in terms of increased velocity of the overall organization. Specifically that the more application teams the platform supports, the more those savings for time and effort spread across teams, and your platform's effectiveness multiplies. Finally, you could pitch scale in terms of talking about how platforms enable your teams to deliver more business value quickly. Because your platform team's taking on more of the common infrastructure, this frees up your development teams to focus just on business value by removing distractions around infrastructure and operations. Now, depending on your environment, you might be able to estimate the amount of time teams currently spend at the bottom of the stack, and therefore make a case based on the time and effort you'll free up per team through implementing a platform. One way we've seen this justification developed is to survey application teams and ask them how much time they spend struggling with tooling, infrastructure, and deployment tools, compared to how much time they spend working on their primary application. So using that data, if you can then show that implementing a platform will reduce that load, you can argue that you'll free application teams to focus their attention on the business value of their applications. Next, we're going to show you a pair of slides that we've used to convince technical leadership of the value of investing in more platformization through talking about scale like this. First, we analyzed this client's software ecosystem to learn how application development was happening there. We found that application teams were implementing a lot of basic infrastructure themselves. They were setting up their own deploy pipelines, they were doing their own monitoring and metrics collection, etc., in addition to their main focus of building their own app. We also found a lot of common infrastructure needs that weren't implemented at all. Things like secrets management and log aggregation that teams were left to their own solutions for. We showed the client this diagram that shows all the infrastructure an application team ought to have to deploy and operate their applications in production, and then talked about how little infrastructure their platform team was currently providing. This highlighted how much infrastructure each application team was having to manage themselves for their apps, and often implemented different ways across their 50 different app teams. After that, we contrasted this future vision of what it could look like if their platform team instead took on more of that common burden by owning shared tooling and providing that tooling as a service to the application teams. This helped us illustrate what it could look like if their application teams were able to focus on just delivering business value. The message resonated with our stakeholders, and afterwards it motivated them to decide to grow their platform teams.
Next up, let's talk about cost. If cost savings is important to your leadership, there's a couple of angles that you can use to pitch your platform. On the one hand, you have cost savings through the scale that Andrew just talked about, reusing infrastructure across application teams. So the more teams you have sharing that infrastructure, the more you save in build costs. On the other hand, you can use the centralization your platform brings to create opportunities to help with cost. That might include applying cost monitoring and controls across your existing applications. So if cloud resources are centralized, you gain visibility across your enterprise to see where cost hotspots are, and then you can address those. Centrally managing cloud resources and how access is handed out allows you to set up restrictions on more expensive services, or to make sure billing alerts are configured so you know when a team spend starts to spike. Infrastructure centralization also gives you opportunities for global cost optimizations. For example, at one client where developer working hours were consistent each week, we found that we could turn off unused cloud development resources on nights and weekends and save up to 30% on the bill for various AWS services. We couldn't have done that without the central lens of a platform team that helped us identify that opportunity and implement that saving strategy across the enterprise.
Next, let's talk about risk. One thing we found particularly effective in pitching platforms to management is framing around risk mitigation. Depending on your organization and its history, management might be worried about different kinds of risk. Successfully shipping products first, like can you actually get your applications built on schedule? They might be worried about operational risks around infrastructure changes, like do your deploys and releases happen safely? They might be concerned about reliability risks, like are they confident that their systems can stay up under load? Maybe worried about security risks. Are systems resilient against intrusions? And are best practices being used for secure architecture and design? And finally, they might be worried about compliance risk. Maybe that's things like accessibility, or maybe the business has specific compliance requirements they need to meet. This is where to listen for what risks worry your executives most. What things do they say that they don't want to end up on the front page of the New York Times? Once you're thinking about that, well, how do you articulate how platforms can help mitigate these risks? For shipping risk, we just talked about scale and velocity. You established an infrastructure stack that you know will meet the needs of application teams and made it possible for teams to reuse proven components to help them build and deliver as quickly as possible. Operational and reliability risks are addressed by centralizing infrastructure for things like deployment, monitoring and alerting, cloud and infrastructure management. The division of responsibility you get from a platform helps make sure you're keeping your focused expertise on those areas in your platform team, instead of expecting application teams to all be operational and reliability experts. For security risks, you can make a similar argument that centralizing security-sensitive infrastructure, for example, things like identity and authentication systems, lets you concentrate your org's security expertise on the systems that need it most and have the whole ecosystem benefit. Again, doing that centralization rather than expecting all your application teams to be security experts. Finally, compliance risks are best addressed with governance, which Kendra will talk about more next.
Going back to the 2023 State of Platform Engineering report, people said that two of the key goals their platforms support are around security processes, which Andrew just talked about, and setting and promoting best practices. Both of these fall under the umbrella of governance. Governance is the set of standards, tools, and processes used to enforce policies on products your organization develops. Some examples include making sure accessibility standards and security processes are followed, establishing consistent visual designing and theming across applications, or making sure vocabulary is used consistently in user-facing products. This is where platforms come in. When application teams are already using common infrastructure and services, your platform provides opportunities to hook policy and standards enforcement into the product development lifecycle. You can bake it right in. So this is where you can consider what may be important to your CIO. Are there compliance risks that your company is uniquely exposed to that they want to mitigate by making sure applications are following key rules? Or is consistency in visual design, user experience, or even API services across products a key priority? Does your organizational leadership feel overwhelmed at the prospect of managing best practices across teams? These are all things that can be addressed with platform governance, and that can help you pitch platforms as a tool to achieve your leaders' other goals. If you're interested in more on how a platform can support governance levers, look for our other PlatformCon session on a carrot and stick approach to raise the bar on application quality, where we'll dive more specifically into how you can use a platform to support your governance.
In conclusion, you can think about which of these 4 concerns we talked about seem like the biggest pain points in your organization, or which ones resonated the most with you as we talked about them. Those are the things to lean on when you build out your business case. Again, it's important to know your audience. The justifications that worked at one company or with one manager won't necessarily work at the next. Hopefully this all helps you think through how to move your organization forward on their platform journey. If you've got questions or comments, you can find us in Platform Engineering Slack or reach out on LinkedIn. And be sure to look for our talk on using carrots and sticks for application quality. Thanks so much, and we look forward to hearing from you.